Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, home of all things stock, investment, and personal finance related. Now for today's video, we've welcomed back Matt Schultz from CleanSpark. They just got back from Dubai where they're meeting with investors and some big money banks, talking about Bitcoin and really educating the financial community on the benefits of this industry. We've got a lot to talk about. CleanSpark also just announced 10 exahash per second, which is a major milestone. Before we get into all that though, please take a second, hit the like button, you guys. It's a big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join. And let me know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of CleanSpark, what your thoughts are on the Bitcoin mining sector as a whole, and your predictions for next year's halving event. Now with that being said, let's get into today's interview. Okay guys, so that's right. We've got Matt Schultz back from CleanSpark. He's the executive chair. Matt's been on the channel a number of times. Obviously, the Bitcoin space overall has been super exciting over the last couple of months. Matt just got back from a big conference in Dubai, so we wanted to invite him on the channel to give us an update on CleanSpark and their operations. So Matt, thanks so much for being with us here today.
Thanks for having me, Bryce. It's good to be back.
Yeah, you're more than welcome. And if you ever have a spare seat to Dubai there, let me know. I've always had that one on my bucket list and I'm excited to hear about it. So let's kick it off there. How was the meeting? I know Anthony Power was over there, a bunch of the CEOs that we have on the channel. What went on and what were the takeaways?
So it was an extension of the event that we did in London earlier in the year. So the AIM conference. This was a little bit more institutional, I would say. The attendees were sovereign wealth funds, larger institutions, bigger banks. A lot of our peer group was there. We had a really great time catching up with everybody in the space. But I think what we're starting to see as we're getting ever closer to the approval, inevitably, of this spot Bitcoin ETF, we're starting to see the bigger banks that are recognizing that perhaps they missed the opportunity or are missing the opportunity. So, there were a lot of analysts there, a lot of investors there, really seeking fundamental baseline information. What differentiates one miner from another? Where does global hash rate go, and what does that do? How does that affect the individual miners? It was interesting speaking to pretty smart people about the Bitcoin space and started talking about machine efficiency and having to really break that down and explain what it means to investors that are just kind of starting to be late arrivals in the space. So it was a great opportunity, a ton of really productive meetings. I mean, conversations went from, everything of, comparing notes, how people are growing, what they're forecasting, what they're seeing, but then, also talking about opportunities for potential future M&A, consolidation within the space, rig and equipment, efficiency, just a multitude of different topics, but certainly worthwhile to be there. And, CleanSpark sponsors these events, and, we don't sell a product, right? So it's not like we're advertising to sell anything, but it's real important to us to make sure that our name is one that's recognized in the space as a leader in the space. And I think, with the research reports and the analyst coverage and certainly the rate at which the institutional holding in our company has grown, it's starting to get some traction. So it was a terrific experience. I'm 6'5", and so flying 19 hours nonstop will take it out of you. My back will probably never be the same. But it was a great trip nonetheless.
Gotcha. I'm 6'1", so you've got a couple inches on me. Now that's awesome to hear, especially from a retail perspective, because that's really our dream, right? Is to get into companies and industries before the big money, the big banks, the institutional guys are aware of it. And it's really interesting to hear because for people like you and I who are in the Bitcoin space and talk about this stuff all the time, it's almost second nature, but there's still a large majority of the world that has no clue about Bitcoin or halving or mining or any of this type of stuff. So it's great to see that you guys are number one sponsoring them and getting more involved with some of these big banks. So we'll just stay on this thread, I guess, Matt. I think you guys have 6 analysts now covering CleanSpark. Most of them have made you their top pick. We've seen some price target increases, obviously, as the underlying asset Bitcoin appreciates. So tell us a little bit about that, because that really is where a lot of the investment activity will come from down the road.
It's an interesting kind of dynamic that's happened, because for a while we weren't covered by anybody. I mean, if you turn the clock back a few years, when Zach and I first started to build this business together, we traded on the OTC. We had no research coverage because we had no investment bank. And so to uplist to the NASDAQ and to do that organically without any kind of a transaction, without any kind of a financing, was really the bootstrapped way to go. So we built these relationships, and investment banking research is something that's very unique. It's not something you can purchase. It's not available to the highest bidder. In fact, most of the firms, there's a wall between banking and research. And when we hosted an event at our facility in Norcross, Georgia, about a year ago, we had to actually schedule 2 days because the bankers from one institution couldn't be on site present with the research team. And that's, designed for investor protections, of course. So, to start small, we had, HC Wainwright, and then BTIG jumped in and did research coverage on us. Then Chardon joined, and Cantor Fitzgerald has joined, Alliance Bernstein has joined, and we've just continued to grow. And, obviously one of the big additions is with JP Morgan Chase. For Chase, obviously, to be led by Jamie Dimon, who's been very vocally opposed to Bitcoin and what it is and what it represents, to have such a critical arm of their business, the AI and DeFi segment of their company, to dive in and do meaningful research, it means a lot for our space and for our sector, particularly for CleanSpark, because, I think my first conversation with Reggie and his team, Charles, goes back, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 months. I mean, this publishing a note and a research report isn't something that happens overnight. And if you've had the opportunity to read these analyst reports, you can see the tremendous amount of work that goes in. So for them to pick us as their top pick is a big deal. Josh Siegler and Will Carlson over at Cantor Fitzgerald. I was in New York, and they invited Zach and Gary and myself to come in on their trading floor, meet their sales team, kind of explain the differentiation, how Bitcoin mining works, to the guys that are actually talking to the institutional investors. And Josh did a tremendous amount of work. He published research and then did a supporting video breaking down the cost per Bitcoin of all the major miners, both pre and post halving, and where he forecast that the price of Bitcoin would have to be, what was going to happen in the industry. I mean, in the recent report from JP Morgan, Reggie theorizes that 20% plus of the hash rate will disappear post halving because the companies can't afford it. I think Josh is more along the lines of 30%. So, while it seems to be this all-out arms race and hash rate approaching 500, it really, I think it's a cash grab at the end. Everybody's trying to plug in and squeeze the last life out of all the efficient miners or inefficient miners that they may have remaining on their fleet before things really get serious next April.
Yeah, I was going to say inefficient ones are being plugged in now. And it's just, this is why I love the Bitcoin space. There's so many dynamics. We're seeing major sentiment change from the institutions, from politicians now. There's all the technical dynamics of the industry. There's the halving. So I want to come back to some of that talk towards the end of the presentation, specifically the halving. But I know you guys just announced another major milestone of 10 exahash per second, so breaking into double digits, which is actually pretty rare and hard to come by. So congrats on that, number one. And can you talk to us a little bit about how that came to be? I know you've mentioned 16 exahash, 20 exahash as future potential milestones. So just give us an update on that, please.
Yeah, so it's been a great year and a half for us. I mean, the stock has struggled a bit, like the entire space. But we chose to be really opportunistic when things were bleak and bad. There were companies that in November of 2021 were placing massive orders for Bitcoin mining machines. And those machines are unlike any other industry. It's not like a traditional data center. You pay for them and they show up. These were paid for 2 and 3 and even 4 fiscal quarters in advance. And the world changed from November of 21 till late 22, when the bottom fell out and we find ourselves in the depths of a really deep bear market. And so, machines that were selling for $80 or $100 a terahash, we picked up our first round of S19 XPs at about $29 per terahash. We then bought 45,000 more this summer, and then another 12,500, and then another block of them. And we recently bought 4.4 exahash of the new S21. And so really what we did is we looked at what we had available. And back in 21, we sold our HODL, got beat up a lot for it publicly. How you're not a maxi, you don't understand Bitcoin. The value isn't holding the Bitcoin. If you're not holding it, why are you here? And the message really was, hey, look, we look at a historical chart of Bitcoin, and then we look at future pricing models for natural gas. And even though we predominantly use nuclear and other non-carbon emitting power, natural gas drives energy prices. So we looked and saw the forecast for energy prices, and it became very clear that margins were going to get squeezed. And then with, the major players in the space ordering $1 billion worth of rigs, difficulty was going to go up. So we sold our HODL. We bought immersion cooling equipment. We bought new facilities. We acquired Mawson infrastructure. We acquired another facility in Washington, Georgia, and we switched those over to the CleanSpark way. And we prepared ourselves for what inevitably would happen, and that is Bitcoin mining machines would bottom out. And I think we've set the floor for any of the major public miners for what they paid for S19J Pros, the S19J Pro Pluses, the S19 XP, we set the floor, and now the S21. What that means, Bryce, nobody has paid less for equipment than has CleanSpark. So it gives us a unique opportunity, and to grow through that period of time has enabled us to kind of cycle out of some of the less efficient rigs that we had. There's always a market. So we buy a facility, it's got rigs plugged in and hashing. We use those, get all the value out of them that we can, and then we kind of rotate out and dollar cost average into our fleet and improve the efficiency. So long answer, but what really has happened, 36 megawatts were online in Washington. We added a 50 megawatt substation and brought 50 additional megawatts online, brought that up to 86 megawatts. When we bought Sandersville, it was an 80 megawatt facility. When we bought it from Mawson, they were hosting for Celsius. So it was some of the machines that we bought and then a lot of hosted machines. And so there was a transitional period that we moved those machines out. And then everything that Zach and Gary had been real active buying in the market, we started to plug in. So we've really made it a focus not to buy a bunch of rigs and sit on them, but to find opportunity for rigs and marry that with opportunity for infrastructure and very quickly pull the two together. And so what we've seen, and really what's a differentiator for us, is the technology side as well as the team. So we have a team of individuals, Bitcoin mining professionals that are passionate about what we do. They believe in the greater good and the cause for Bitcoin. They believe in what it does for society and for the world. But they also are shareholders of CleanSpark. And so when they touch a rig, when they install something, they do it knowing that this has an impact on them as well. So we have among the highest efficiency and the highest uptime of anybody in the space. And then you take what Brad and Taylor have done, and we kind of overlay technology. So we've got firmware and software that enables us to do some really unique things with miners that maybe a lot of other people don't think about. The workhorse in the space now would be like an S19 J Pro series. So we're talking about a machine that operates at, let's just say for averages, you got 94s and 104s and 110s, but let's say it's 100 terahash per second machine. And it consumes about 3,000 watts. So you can do simple math, it's 30 watts per terahash. Well, that's more efficient than the global average. The The average globally is closer to 38 watts a terahash. So we can take that machine with a stock power supply and with the new technology that we have, and we can run it up, instead of a 100 terahash machine, we can run it up to a 125 terahash machine. But in correlation with that, it also increases the energy consumption. So we have active models running all the time, and it says, okay, here's where difficulty is, and this is the current price of energy. This is the spot price of Bitcoin. And so it builds a model. Does it make sense right now to operate at nameplate value, or do we step on the throttle a little bit, consume a bit more energy and produce more Bitcoin? But we also have spent a tremendous amount of time, and you probably won't speak to a lot of miners that do this. We've also done extensive studies on underclocking. So that same machine, I can crank it down, or Taylor and Brad and their teams can crank that down to 72 or 73 terahash per second and have the efficiency at about 21 or 22 watts. So you make it into a mini XP. So the analyst says, basically, or the analysis, if Bitcoin prices are under pressure and energy prices are high, then we're going to slow those back down a little bit to increase the profitability on the underlying Bitcoin that we're producing. So we're using technology to our advantage. So, you ask, how did we get here? Well, first of all, we rotated out of some of the less efficient machines, the Avalons, some of the early S19 series. We brought in the S19 XPs. We've overlaid the firmware and software on our entire fleet. We obviously have a tremendous immersion cooling facility, but then we've started to cycle in these new machines. And so that's enabled us to bump our hash rate up. Now, we've been able to keep our efficiency up because we actually built labs in our facility. So we have the ability to do repairs under microscope, on the big screen, all the way down to chip level. So when another miner has a failure on a hash board, and that has to come out, and that unit has to be sent out to be serviced elsewhere for warranty, we've reached the point in scale that we now do those repairs in-house, and warranty services provided in-house. So the machine comes off the rack, it goes into the lab, a replacement machine goes in its spot, and it gets repaired on site, ready to be reinstalled. So by maximizing the efficiency, focusing on uptime, and incentivizing the incredible team of people we have, that's what's enabled us to continue to grow our hash rate. So to go from, 1 exahash a year ago last January to 10 right now, is a huge load. I mean, that's it's a massive lift, and it's taken a tremendous amount of extremely talented people. But the fun is just starting. I mean, we've got this huge expansion in Sandersville that's really it's going to kind of set us apart, I think.
Yeah, I would agree. There's so much you mentioned there, Matt, to unload. And I know we've talked about the over and underclocking. It's insane to me how far the precision and the analytics has come in the last couple of years. Like, it used to be guys plugging machines or rigs in their garage, right? And now the fact that you guys are monitoring this stuff down to the finest detail, the on-site repairs. You've mentioned that theme of ownership and pride and staff that really cares about the business multiple times. And I know that people do make the difference. And the foresight from yourself and the rest of the team to understand the cyclicality of Bitcoin price and energy pricing and modeling. This is exactly why, and for full disclosure, you guys, I'm invested in CleanSpark. I think you're close to one of my top holdings in the space now, Matt, because everything you're saying is exactly, you're putting, or I'm picking up what you're putting down, they say, Now, speaking of HODL, this is a super contentious point right now. As you said, when you guys were selling a couple years ago, you took a lot of heat for it. I remember myself thinking, why would they sell compared to a HUD 8 or something that's holding on? Now, foresight is 2020, and it looks like you guys were the smart ones in the room. But you've shifted gears, and you've started HODLing. Obviously, the Bitcoin price has been beaten up. You're aggressively adding. I think you're over 2,300 Bitcoin now. So obviously I know price and halving plays a role in that, but I'm curious to see, because we've specifically heard from CEOs on the channel, HODLing is not the way to go. They want to treat their business like oil and gas. They want to sell monthly production. And if people want to hold Bitcoin for the growth potential there, they should just hold Bitcoin in an account or an ETF or whatever. Obviously, CleanSpark has taken a counter approach to that, which I personally agree with. Why do you think your approach is better?
Well, I don't know that it's better. I just think it's different. I mean, the team of guys that lead the company, Zach and Gary and the entire staff, these decisions aren't made, based on which direction the wind is blowing. There's a lot of analytical research that goes into this. And, if you go back and you look at past halving cycles, the number of days before the halving and then post halving until the peak of the bull market, it's pretty clear. And I think everybody agrees that Bitcoin is likely to have a significant price appreciation between now and 180 days post halving. If you just follow the history, that's generally true. So when you overlay that with the adoption that's likely to come as a result of the approval of these spot ETFs, the acceptance of Bitcoin as an asset class in many investors' portfolios, and the continued work that the space has done to show not only can we be the cleanest from an energy perspective, but we can rapidly decarbonize faster than any other industry. And we've demonstrated that, all of us. But additionally, that we make a perfect partner for the grid, that we can curtail a load in literally in seconds to allow that energy to be used elsewhere. Companies have taken different approaches. They've chosen to sell energy back through demand response, or, like CleanSpark, we partner with the cities. And so as you look at that model and you understand what the costs are, you look at a company like CleanSpark. In our last Q, we said publicly that our cost for a Bitcoin is about $11,000. Well, if we're in this business and we're making, substantial hundreds of millions of dollars investment in infrastructure and ASIC miners, we have a very strong, very bullish sentiment on the underlying commodity, Bitcoin. And if we can produce that coin, like I say, we're coming up on our annual report, so forgive me for using stale figures, but, our last Q is the best thing I can talk about. And, at $11,000 a Bitcoin, obviously difficulty's gone up from there, but if the market today is 35, and there's a pretty strong expectation that the market is going to continue to appreciate, we'd be foolish not to. Zach called the top at 69 when we started pulling the trigger to sell it, and he called the bottom this summer. I mean, we didn't sell anything back when it was, or we didn't start to hodl anything back in the 15, 16,000 nightmare time last winter. But we were selling everything in order to maximize our efficiency and our uptime. So, the thing I would say, I think the companies that would say it's a silly idea to hodl don't have a balance sheet that would enable them to hodl right now. And I don't mean that as a slight against anyone. You're going to be the biggest fan of your method of doing business. I personally think infrastructure first, own your asset, own your facility, have your team all aligned in the right direction, and then make it meaningful for the communities you work in. And there's a CleanSpark posted on its YouTube channel, and I'll send you a link when we hang up. But it was a TV story done from Georgia about the impact CleanSpark is having. And the director of economic development said, because CleanSpark is here, all of the rest of the community is paying less for power. We now have the ability to reduce property taxes as a result of the revenue derived from CleanSpark, and the city budgets have doubled. In fact, they talked about the fact that we're adding 6 figures a month to the budgets of these tiny little rural towns in Georgia. So rather than having pickets out front, picket lines, and people complaining, we have representatives of cities that are calling myself and Zach and Gary and Scott and, our entire team saying, hey, fellas, what's it going to take to have you come do that here? So knowing that we have that kind of flexibility, we wanted to demonstrate and really show our commitment to the underlying commodity, but we also think it makes great financial sense. If we can hodl Bitcoin that cost us, again, last report, $11,000 to mine, and hold on to them until they're 50, 75, $100,000, then our shareholders would likely be very pleased.
Yeah, I think we would be likely pleased there, Matt. And what a narrative shift, from the big bad Bitcoin companies to now the community ambassadors. And I know in some of our previous videos, feel free to go check it out, you guys. We've talked extensively about those relationships with those local communities, and I think that's great too. Now, just to follow up on the HODL, Matt, do you guys have a specific target by having, or are you just hodling everything you don't need for OPEX, basically?
So over the summer, we got real aggressive. We hodled most everything that we mined. You saw in our last update, we sold 500 Bitcoin last month, I think, but we grew our hodl. The idea was that when we announced the purchase of the S21s, Bryce, we paid $14 per terahash for those machines that operate at 17.5 watts per terahash, and they're 200 terahash per second machines. So at $14 per terahash, those things have a payback period of less than 300 days. So we wanted to be responsible and not just use equity, but use a combination of equity and the Bitcoin that we produce to kind of pay for those deliveries. We said in there that we have the ability to pay for them out of cash flow, which we do, but we wanted to accelerate that. So we like to cover our OPEX out of our Bitcoin sales, and then be selective about utilization of Bitcoin or equity, making sure that it's accretive. It has to have a quick ROI in order to justify us using equity for it. So that's kind of the measurement that goes into that. As far as a target, we absolutely have internal numbers. It probably wouldn't be appropriate to talk about, because then if we exceed it, it seems silly, and if we fall short, then I don't want to look like I broke a promise. But certainly our expectation is that we'll continue to grow into and beyond the halving. And if the conversations that I had, our team had in Dubai are any indication, there is likely going to be some additional consolidation in the space. A lot of the less efficient rigs just simply won't survive post-halving. So if a third of the hash rate disappears, it's going to increase the profitability for the more efficient mining fleets and mining operators. So we've been really aggressively looking at opportunities to continue to be, to accretively grow. We feel like this is a tipping point. I don't mean to oversell it, but there has not been, in my personal experience, I don't know that there's been a point in my life that had the same possibility financially as what the next 12 months really look like in the Bitcoin space. I mean, just owning Bitcoin personally, I'm really wildly optimistic about where it goes. Understanding the scarcity built in and understanding the frustration that exists. Doesn't matter if we're talking about foreign countries or foreign currencies or our domestic currency. There's a huge frustration with the fiat system in general, and to have something, to have these banks now start to say this is digital gold. This is a generational shift. There are obviously two sides of play. You got the bears and the bulls. There are a lot of people that want to be naysayers and knock down Bitcoin, but it's interesting. Bitcoin's terrible because it's dirty. Well, until you look at the load and you find out that it's of any load its size, it's decarbonized quicker than anything else. Well, it's bad for the grid. Well, except that it isn't. It actually works as a shock absorber, and it incentivizes clean energy development. Well, it's totally overpriced at $7,000. It's a bubble that's going to burst, and we keep hearing that it's fake money, and it's used for all of these illicit purposes. I mean, to see here in the U.S., Senator Warren made a statement about the amount of money that was funneled to terrorist organizations through Bitcoin, and to have them actually walk that back and acknowledge that because it was Bitcoin, they were able to track it and seize that. What really it says is that you can see the van go on the blockchain from point A to point B. You don't know who's in it, but you know where it's going. And if you identify what's there, then it's actually safer. So I hope I don't come across too much like a homer here, but man, I'm just so passionate about where we stand as a company, where we stand as an industry, and getting to spend a few days with Fred and his team from Marathon, and with the girls from Hut, and with Jeff from Bit Farms, and to really sit down, enjoy a meal, talk about our industry, talk about our plans. We're not competitors. We all do the same thing, right? I mean, we want to make sure that we have the right image, and that our message is correct, and that people understand what we do. Because at the end of the day, anything that hurts Marathon or Riot or Hut or Hive or Cypher hurts CleanSpark. And so to have that friendliness and that collaboration, and genuine, I mean, sincerely good relationships, it's a good space to be in right now.
Yeah, I definitely concur. I'm very fortunate to be a part of it, and it is a small, tight-knit group who all fundamentally believe not only in the financial opportunity, but the opportunity to make the world better and equalize wealth and distribution. And I just had Nico from Simply Bitcoin on talking about Elizabeth Warren and that terrorist comment and stuff, and we concluded it's just a last-ditch effort to do whatever they can to throw mud at the wall. But I concur with you, Matt. I think this is a massive opportunity for anyone invested in this space, whether it's miners or Bitcoin or whatever. Hopefully you at CleanSpark can pay off my mortgage, and we're laughing about it in a couple of years. But it's so great to be a part of. Now I'm going to ask you a couple other questions, quick ones you may or may not want to answer. Do you think we'll see a spot Bitcoin ETF by Christmas?
I do personally. That's Matt. That's not CleanSpark, but yes, I do.
I agree. And you said you guys do some internal modeling on price. Will you throw out a price prediction from Matt, not CleanSpark, on Bitcoin by end of year?
Oh gosh, I was asked that on a panel, and I said I felt like 50,000 is a conservative number. I don't want to say a bigger number because I don't want to seem crazy, but I think six figures next year is likely.
I would agree. I had 50 in my mind. And what's interesting with the last bull run is I think we were really cut short with a lot of the fraud and issues and stuff going on. So this bull cycle will be nice. I have one more question, Matt. Do you have a couple minutes here?
Absolutely. All the time you want.
Okay. So this one's interesting, and I've wanted to get your thoughts on it. So Bitcoin traditionally traded similar to kind of the NASDAQ and tech companies, obviously correlated to Bitcoin price itself. And it used to be, I know the Hut 8 girls always say it's a call option on Bitcoin. So Bitcoin price would go up 1%. The miners are all up 2, 3, 4%. Now we've started to see some decoupling there. There's actually been some days where Bitcoin is down, miners are up, miners are down, Bitcoin is up, vice versa. Why do you think that is? And do you think people are starting to treat this as its own asset, independent of tech stocks, NASDAQ? And do you think we're going to continue to see that leverage for Bitcoin miners, or are those days now in the past?
It was always puzzling to me to see the correlation with tech, because tech companies each benefit and thrive based on some proprietary secret sauce of what they do, right? ChatGPT or Microsoft or Tesla, they all have some differentiator. Bitcoin mining and the Bitcoin miners themselves have really become a commodity. So our business is really more about mining than it is about tech. It's not picks and shovels, right? So that decoupling makes sense. Where Bitcoin has kind of decoupled from the overall market, in my mind, leads to people starting to develop the belief and understanding that there's going to be an appropriate set of rules and governance to treat Bitcoin like the independent asset class that it is. This is not a domestic commodity. This is a global commodity. It's a global market. It empowers people from every class of life, all walks of life. And it changes literally the fundamental way that we look at growing the energy space, that we look at utilizing capital, that we look at even the Web3 environment, and just paying for things. What's next when we start to layer in, right? I mean, what data could you keep on that blockchain, and what does that mean outside of financial services? And I think Bitcoin is unique unto itself, And I think people are a little puzzled. So as Bitcoin continues to generate increased adoption, acceptance as an asset class, you realize, Bryce, that when institutional investors like a Fidelity, when Fidelity takes a position in a company, Fidelity takes a 9.9% position in a company. We've never seen that in our space. It doesn't exist. You know, a lot of the bigger companies, Marathon, Riot, CleanSpark, we have, I think we've got a significant portion of institutional holdings, but it's ETF stuff. It's index funds. It's not institutions taking a meaningful position and vying for board input. I think those days are coming. And quite frankly, I don't think that the market knows how to deal with this business. I mean, at the end of the day, with a $35,000 Bitcoin, we still have less of a market cap for Bitcoin than we do for many of the tech companies individually, right? I mean, we're what, $650 billion, $700 billion as a total market cap in Bitcoin, and you compare that to Apple or Tesla or any other, Nvidia, and it's a fraction of what their market cap is. But when you look at the scarcity that's built in and the demand that's pent up behind it, the exposure to what these ETFs could be, I mean, I think this run from 28 to 35 is just the early stages of seeding the ETFs, because they can't sell anything if they don't have the asset. So I know that doesn't speak directly to the decoupling. I think the uncertainty, people are starting to figure out that this is not another run-of-the-mill tech stock, but the returns for this industry are far greater than mining gold. So we're still trying to find our way, but what a great day to be alive, to be involved in a space that has so much possibility and potential to really change the world.
Truly does. Yeah. And I know this past winter for crypto and Bitcoin has been tough, but I thank the dynamics every day, because it's allowed people like us to accumulate and build and get in a great position to take advantage of this next run. So that's a great spot to end, I think, today, Matt. Awesome comments. Really appreciate the insight. Great discussion, and glad to hear so much came out of Dubai. I'll kick it back to you for any closing thoughts, and appreciate your time.
No, I appreciate the shareholders that have shown faith in it, to see a stock with the volatility of our sector. And that's all the companies in the space. You get people that are real bullish and real bearish, and it's easy to get frustrated. At the end of the day, we're working towards the same end, and that is for the benefit of our shareholders, for the benefit of the Bitcoin blockchain, and to build our company into something that's meaningful and that matters. And if the relationships, pardon me, with these small towns in Georgia are any indication, we're off to a good start. But when I say start, I mean that literally. We're just at the leading edge of this industry, and I'm really, really excited for what the future holds. And I appreciate you being a voice for what we do, and sharing an unbiased opinion with all of the miners and within the sector about what you see and what you think and what you feel, and inviting people to comment, because I don't think there's a right way or a wrong way to do what we do. There are different ways, and the better that we can get at doing what we do collaboratively, the bigger and stronger and more resilient our industry becomes. So I really, Bryce, really appreciate the work you do, and I look forward to the next opportunity to come chat.
Yeah, I do too. These are always good. Thank you for that. And people watching, you can do your part here. Help share this around, like, comment, whatever questions you may have for CleanSpark, and Matt and the team will be sure to answer next time. If you're still watching at this point, hit the like button, you guys. Subscribe to the channel. That's all for now. Matt, thanks for your time, and we'll see you soon.
See you, Bryce. Thank you.